Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. I'm glad you're here, because the story we're sitting down with today isn't the one you think it is. The title asks a fair question. Can a man genuinely retire here on $2,000 a month and find love after 60? And our man Brendan went looking for the answer. He's 55, Irish, born and raised in Cork. Spent 32 years at sea as a second engineer on container ships. The sort of fella whose hands know the weight of a wrench better than the weight of a mortgage. Lost his wife of 26 years to a heart attack in their kitchen, 18 months before any of this began. And after a bad stretch of nights with the telly on and a bottle close to hand, he started watching the same retirement videos a lot of you have probably watched yourselves. What I'll say up front is this. There's no villain in Brendan's story. There's no other man, no hidden husband, no stolen passport, no G-Cash scammer pretending to be a nurse from Cebu. The woman he met was real. She loved him in her own way, and her family was as real as your own. And he still came home half broke, with a daughter who isn't speaking to him properly, and a hole in his savings the size of the boat he was meant to retire onto. That's the kind of cautionary tale this is. Quieter than most, harder to shake. I think this one's going to stick with you. So pour yourself something, settle in, and listen. Here's Brendan, in his own words. Right. So, where do you want me to start? The beginning, I suppose. The proper beginning, not the YouTube beginning. I went to sea at 23. That was 1993. Cork wasn't doing much then. Half the lads I went to school with were going to England or America, and I had a cousin in Rotterdam said the Dutch shipping lines were taking on Irish engineers if you didn't mind the rotations. I didn't mind. I didn't know what I'd mind, to be honest with you. I was 23. So off I went. 32 years. That's what I gave it. Container ships mostly. The big ones. Rotterdam to Singapore and back. Singapore to Yokohama. Down through the Suez. All that carry on. I came up through the engine room. Started as a fourth. Finished as a second. Knees are gone from the ladders. Right ear's about half what it used to be. The diesels eat your hearing in the end, no matter what you stick in there. There's a particular smell, bunker fuel and bilge water, and the sweat of 9 other men in a steel box, that I will carry to my grave, whether I want to or not. But that's the work. The work was fine. The work was who I was. Myriad was who I came home to. We met when I was 21. Married at 25. Bought the house in Glanmire in 94, when she was already carrying our OIF. Had our boy Connor 2 years after. And I'll tell you straight, she raised those 2 children. I want to be honest about that, because there's a temptation, when your wife dies, to make her into a saint and yourself into a hero, and that's not what happened. I was at sea 6 months a year. Sometimes 7. She did everything. School runs, doctor's appointments, the bills, the boiler when it went, the time Awif broke her arm off the trampoline, the time Connor got himself in trouble at 15, all of it. I'd come home and try to be a father for 8 weeks, and then off I'd go again. Myriad held the whole thing together with both hands, and she never once made me feel small for not being there. She was, Christ, she was just a good woman. That's the thing. She was just genuinely a good woman. And the plan was West Cork. We'd been saving for it since the kids were in primary school. A small place down near Shul. Nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms and a view of Roaring Water Bay. I was going to get a little boat. Nothing serious. A 16-foot day boat for the mackerel, that sort of thing. The grandkids would come down in the summer holidays. That was it. That was the whole dream. We weren't ambitious people, the two of us. We just wanted that. She died on a Tuesday. I was 3 days out of Oman on the Maersk run. My phone went at about 4 in the morning ship's time, and it was Oefe, and I knew before she said a word. You know the way you know. Massive heart attack in the kitchen. She was 52 years old. She'd been making a cup of tea. The kettle was still warm when Oefe found her. 52. It took me 8 days to get home. By the time I got there, she was already in the ground a week. They'd waited as long as they could, but they couldn't wait for me. I want you to sit with that for a second because I had to. My wife of 26 years and I missed her funeral because I was in the wrong sea. I won't dress up what came after. The first 6 months I was useless. The next 6 I was worse. The house in Glanmire. You don't realize how much sound a person makes until they stop making it. I couldn't sleep in our bed. I slept on the couch with the telly on. I started drinking before lunch, and I was honest enough about it to know I was doing it, but not honest enough to stop. The pension paperwork came through, and I couldn't open the envelopes for 3 weeks. A wife came round when she could, but she had her own family in Carrigaline by then, and Connors in Australia. Brisbane, he flew over for the funeral, and then back he went. Couldn't blame him. Right. So that brings us to the YouTube. That brings us to the laptop at 4 in the morning. I'd been at it a few months by then. The algorithm, you know how it goes. You watch one video about something, and then the whole machine decides that's who you are. I'd watched one thing about retiring abroad, just out of curiosity. And within a fortnight, my whole feed was these fellas on beaches, with cocktails telling me I could live like a king on $2,000 a month. Some of them were full of it, you could tell. You've been around the world long enough you know a chancer when you see one. But some of them seemed all right. Sensible men. Pensions like mine. And I'll be honest with you. It wasn't the women I was looking at first. It was the silence. I was looking at any version of my life that didn't involve sitting in that house, listening to the clock in the hall. I ruled out Thailand straight away. I'd had too many lads off the ships tell me Thailand stories, and they were all the same story in the end. Couldn't face it. The Philippines kept coming up. They speak English. They're Catholic, which I'm not particularly anymore, but I was raised in it, and there's a comfort in it you can't shake. The cost of living looked manageable on paper. And the videos, God forgive me, the videos made it look like something a man could do. So, one night, about 11:30, I'd had 3 or 4 whiskeys, and I was sat at the kitchen table with the laptop, and I downloaded Christian Filipina, just to look. That's what I told myself. Just to have a look at what was out there. I want to be clear about that. That's the lie I told myself first, and it was the easiest one. Every other lie after came easier because of it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first night, I just scrolled. I didn't message anyone. I'd a glass of whiskey beside the laptop and Marriade's reading lamp on because the main light felt wrong, and I scrolled through profiles for about 2 hours before I closed the thing and went to bed, feeling like I'd done something I needed to wash off. It wasn't what I expected, or it was, I suppose, but worse. There's a sort of profile that comes up first, and you can spot it inside 10 seconds. 23 years old, the photos all taken in the same bedroom, the bio is 2 sentences, and one of them is about God, and the other is about looking for a serious man. Within a day of signing up, I'd 7 or 8 messages from girls young enough to be my granddaughter, calling me, "Hi, handsome," and asking, how was my day, Po? I deleted most of them without replying. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I wasn't tempted to write back to 1 or 2. I'm 55. I'm not dead. But there was something about it that turned my stomach. Felt like being trawled for, you know. the way you'd troll a line off the back of a boat. So I changed my settings. I bumped the age range up to 35 to 50. I ticked the box that said widowed, and the whole machine slowed down. The messages stopped coming in, which suited me fine. Joy's profile came up about 3 weeks in. She was 41. She had 3 photos, and only one of them was a selfie. The other 2 were just her. One at a fiesta of some sort, with what looked like nieces or nephews around her. The other at a beach with her hair tied back. She wasn't even looking at the camera. She was in a blue blouse buttoned to the collar in 2 of them. Her bio said she was a pharmacy assistant in Bacolod City, that she was widowed, that she liked walking and church and reading. That was it. No emojis. No looking for my king. Just plain. And she wasn't trying to look young. That's what got me. She had gray at the temples, and she wasn't dyeing it. There were lines round her eyes when she smiled. She looked like a woman, not a girl pretending. That mattered to me more than I'd known it would. I didn't message her. She messaged me, and the message said, I remember it word for word. Hello, Brendan. I see you are from Ireland. Is it true the rain there is sideways? My cousin worked in Limerick, and he said the rain is sideways, and I cannot picture this. That was it. No flirting, no hi handsome, just a question about the bloody weather. I laughed at the kitchen table, out loud. I hadn't laughed properly in a year and a half, and I laughed at this woman asking me about sideways rain. I wrote back about an hour later and told her, yes, the rain is sideways. Also, it goes upwards sometimes if the wind is right. And I told her about a January I spent in Killybegs, where the rain came at you from below off the harbor. She wrote back the next morning, and on it went. We didn't move fast. That's important to say. We messaged for about a fortnight before we did our first video call, and even then, she had her sister sitting in the background doing something at a sewing machine. I noticed that. The sister waved at me halfway through and went back to whatever she was doing. The video calls became a thing. Once a week at first, then twice, then nearly every evening her time, which was middle of the day my time. She'd be on her break at the pharmacy, sitting outside on a plastic chair, and you could hear the tricycles going past behind her and somebody's karaoke from across the street. Always karaoke. I learned later it's just constant in the Philippines. Somebody is always murdering an old air supply song within 100 meters of you at any hour of the day. She told me about her husband. Roderick, his name was. He'd been a fisherman out of one of the small ports in Negros, went out one morning in 2018, and the boat came back without him. They never found him. She told me this on a Tuesday afternoon, and she didn't cry, which was the bit that got me. She said it the way you say something you've already said 1,000 times. I knew that voice. I'd been practicing it myself with Miraad's name in the chemist's and at the petrol station. We talked about that, about the funerals you missed and the ones you wished you had, about the way a kitchen sounds different, about, I don't know. We talked about the daft things, too. She thought Irish people ate potatoes at every meal, and I thought I'd let her keep believing that for a while. I sent her a photo of the chipper down the road, and she sent me a photo of a Jollibee in Bacolod, and asked if we'd one of them in Cork. I said no. She said, "You are missing out, Brendan. The chicken is very crispy." About 6 weeks in, she sent me a parcel. I want to tell you about that parcel because I think about it more than I should. It came in a small brown padded envelope from Bacolod City, custom sticker, declared value about €2. Inside was a wooden rosary. Tiny thing, the beads no bigger than peppercorns, and a folded note that said her mother had taken it to the parish church to be blessed, and she hoped it would bring me peace, and remind me I was not forgotten. That was it. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't hint at anything. She didn't even mention it on the next call until I brought it up. And when I did, she just smiled and said, "Oh, good. It arrived." Like it was nothing. I put it in my pocket. It's still in my pocket now, if you can believe that. Different pocket, different trousers, but it travels with me. I told my daughter I was going on holiday. That was the lie of a mission. I told Awif, "Look, I need to get away. I'm going to the Philippines for 6 weeks. I'll do a bit of traveling, sort my head out." I didn't tell her about Joy. Didn't tell her about 3 months of video calls. Didn't tell her I'd already booked a one-way flight and was going to figure out the return at the other end. I told her 6 weeks, because 6 weeks was a thing you could say without your daughter looking at you sideways. Awif looked at me sideways anyway. She said, "Da, are you sure?" And I said yes. And she let it go, because what was she going to do? Ground me? I packed light. 1 case, the rosary in the inside pocket of my coat. The flight was Cork to Heathrow, Heathrow to Doha, Doha to Cebu, 26 hours door to door. And I hadn't flown for pleasure since 1989 when Murayad and I went to the Canaries. I was a wreck. 2 whiskeys in the Heathrow bar at 8 in the morning, which the lad behind the counter didn't blink at. God love him. We landed in Cebu at 11:15 at night, and I walked out of Mactan Cebu International into a wall of heat that felt like opening an oven door. 28 degrees and 90% humidity at midnight. My shirt was stuck to me before I'd cleared the taxi rank. The whole airport smelled of jet fuel and frangipani and somebody frying something nearby. She was there at the barrier with Marites, her older sister. Marites was holding a small sign written in biro on the back of a cereal box that said Brenda O'Sullivan, spelt wrong on both counts. I started laughing again, second time in 2 years. Joy looked at me, and her face went, and she started crying. Just stood there crying, and I dropped the case on the floor and put my arms around her, and Marites was patting me on the shoulder saying, "Welcome, welcome, welcome." And I could smell Joy's hair, which was sort of coconut, and something else, soap maybe. And the aircon of the arrivals hall was hitting the sweat on my back, and somewhere a child was screaming, and a recorded voice was saying something in Tagalog about unattended baggage. We got into a tricycle outside. The 3 of us crammed in the sidecar with my case across our knees. Joy in the middle, Marites on the airport side. Joy's hand came over and rested on top of mine on the case handle. Just rested there. No squeeze, no fuss. I sat in that tricycle going down the road from Mactan towards Lapu-Lapu, with the warm wind hitting my face and the diesel of the trike louder than any engine I'd worked beside in years. And I thought, Christ, this might actually be real. I'm telling you that bit honestly, because everything that comes after has to be measured against it. I wasn't a fool walking into a scam. I was a man walking into something that felt, in that exact moment, like the first true thing in 18 months. Whether I should have been wiser at 55 than I was, well, we'll come to that. The first hotel I'd booked was a Travelodge near the airport for 3 nights, just so I'd a base while I got my bearings. Joy and Marites dropped me there about 1:30 in the morning, and Joy wouldn't come up. That was the second thing that mattered to me. I'd half expected her to, if I'm honest, and part of me had been bracing for that conversation. The polite no, and I didn't have to have it. She kissed me on the cheek in the lobby, said, "Sleep, Brendan, we will see you tomorrow." And off the 2 of them went in the trike. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the sheets, with the aircon rattling, and listened to a karaoke bar 2 streets over working its way through what I'm fairly sure was every Whitney Houston song ever recorded. I Will Always Love You. Somebody was screaming at 2:45 in the morning. Welcome to the Philippines. The next week I started looking for somewhere to live. I'd budgeted for a hotel for a fortnight max. Cebu hotels at decent standard run you about 3,500 pesos a night, roughly 57 euros, and that adds up fast. Joy took me round to a few places her aunt knew about. We landed on a 1-bedroom condo in a development called Mactan Newtown, in Lapu-Lapu City. Sea view of sorts if you stood on the balcony and craned your neck left. Decent aircon in the bedroom. Walking distance to a small SM mall. 25th floor. The rent was 35,000 pesos a month, which is about 570 euros, which on a 30-year lease back home would have got me a damp bedsit in Man. So I felt like I was getting something for my money. I paid 2 months up front, plus a month's deposit. 105,000 pesos gone in the first week. About 1,720 euros. I told myself that was fine. That was setup costs. Anyone moving anywhere has setup costs. Joy didn't move in. I want to underline that bit. She had an aunt in Mactan, her mother's sister, lived 20 minutes away in a smaller condo, and Joy stayed there. She'd come over in the morning. We'd have coffee on the balcony watching the planes come in over the water. She'd cook some breakfast. She made a proper sinangag, garlic rice with a fried egg on top. She'd brought a little bag of jasmine rice from Bacolod, because she said the Cebu rice was not the same. And then around 9 or 10 at night, she'd kiss me and go back to her aunt's. Every night. For about 6 weeks. That mattered. I'm telling you, it mattered, even now. Because everything I'd half read on the internet about the Philippines said the girl moves in on day 3 and starts asking for a washing machine on day 5, and Joy was sleeping in her aunt's spare room. When I asked her about it once, in week 3, she got a bit embarrassed and said something about not wanting the neighbors in the building to think she was, and she didn't finish the sentence, she just made a face. I left it. The Catholic stuff in the Philippines is not a costume, by the way. People mean it. Whether you do or not, they do. We went to Mass on the first Sunday at the Archdiocesan Shrine of Santo Niño in Cebu City. Took a grab over from Lapu-Lapu, about an hour with the traffic. I hadn't been to Mass since our wife's confirmation in 2014. I sat there with Joy beside me in the heat. The place is open at the sides, ceiling fans the size of helicopter rotors going overhead, hundreds of people, kids running about, candles everywhere. And during the prayers of the faithful, she said Mariad's name out loud. In her head, I mean, but I knew she'd said it. And afterwards, she told me she had. I prayed for your wife, Brendan. I asked God to tell her you are taking care of yourself. Christ, what do you do with that? What does a man do with that? She started calling me my Brendan. Not just Brendan. My Brendan. And the thing about that, Mariad used to call me my fool. Not in a nasty way, in an Irish way. My fool. You'd lose your head if it wasn't bolted on. And Joy didn't know that. She couldn't have known that. But the my landed in the same place in my chest. I'm not embarrassed to tell you it took some of the weight off. About 5 weeks in, we flew to Bacolod to meet the family. Cebu Pacific, 4,200 pesos return for the 2 of us. An hour in the air. We landed at Bacolod Sile and got a jeepney into the city and then a tricycle out to the barangay where her parents lived. The road went from tarmac to potholes to dirt in the space of 15 minutes. Sugarcane on both sides. Negros is sugar country. The whole island runs on it. And the heat was a different kind of heat from Cebu. Drier, dustier, the smell of cane fires somewhere off in the distance. The house. Christ. I want to describe it accurately because it matters to what comes after. Concrete blocks for the front 2/3, bamboo and corrugated iron for the back third where the kitchen was. Tin roof. A concrete slab out front with a battered plastic chair. 2 rooms divided by a curtain. There were 10 people living in it. Joy's parents, her brother and his wife, and their 2 kids. Maritis's husband, Maritis herself, was back in Cebu. Cherry May, the youngest sister, and a cousin who was just kind of there, the way cousins are in those families. Nobody could quite tell me whose son he was originally. Her father was sat on the front porch when we pulled up. Tatay, they all called him. He stood up to shake my hand, and I saw the foot. He was missing the big toe, and the next one in on the left foot, and the dressing was fresh. You could smell the disinfectant. Diabetic ulcers, the kind that don't heal. His skin had that gray color I'd seen on a few of the older lads on the ships. The man was 63 years old, and he looked 75. There was a plastic shopping bag with about 8 different bottles of medication on the table next to him, the labels half worn off, and a glucose monitor that was clearly second-hand. I want to be clear here. The diabetes was not a story. The toes were not a story. The medication was not a story. I'm an engineer. I've seen ulcers on ship's cooks. I know what a real one looks like. The mother, Nane, came out, and she took my face in both her hands and started crying. Just full-on crying, both hands on my cheeks. Salamat, Salamat, Sir Brendan. You are a blessing from God to our family. I'm standing there with this little woman holding my face in front of 9 other people I've just met, and I didn't know what to do. So I just sort of patted her on the shoulder and said, "Ah, no, it's grand, it's grand." Which, hearing it back, is not the right thing to say. But it was what came out. They'd killed a chicken for me. Lechon manok done over coals out the back, with rice and pancit, and a great big bowl of sinigang. San Miguel beers, the brother kept pushing them at me. Cherry May, the youngest, sang me a song after the food. I don't even remember what the song was. Something American, very earnest. And the whole village was sort of drifting in and out of the front yard to look at the Kano Joy had brought home from Cebu. Nobody asked me for a thing. Not a thing. When we got back to Cebu, 3 days later, Joy was quiet on the plane. She stared out the window the whole way. When we got into the condo, she sat on the couch. And after a long bit, she said, very quiet, "Brendan, Papa's prescriptions. I think we have 1 more week, and then we don't know. Maritis and I, we usually share, but Maritis is also having a hard time." She did not ask me. I want to be precise about that. She did not ask. She told me a fact, and she let the silence sit. I said, "How much?" She said, 20,000 for 1 month, all of them together, and the dressings. I sent her 25,000 pesos by GCash that night, about 410 euros. I added the extra 5 because I wanted there to be a bit of slack. She cried. Properly cried, ugly crying, into a tea towel. Over the next 10 weeks, there were more transfers. 8,000 for a hospital trip when his blood sugar went mad. 15,000 for a new glucose monitor because the old one was giving wrong readings, which I confirmed myself by checking it against mine. I'm a borderline diabetic too. Since you're asking, the Merchant Marine Catering will do that to you. 12,000 for the bus to Bacolod City, and back when he had to see the specialist. By the end of the 3rd month, I'd sent 180,000 pesos in dribs and drabs, about 2,950 euros. And I told myself, this was what Maryad would have done if it had been my father. I'll tell you what I told myself exactly. I said, Brendan, you spent 32 years looking after your own family by being absent. Now you've a chance to look after a family by being present. This is what it should have looked like the first time round. I believed that. I want you to understand that I believed that. Because in some ways, it was even true. The problem was the maths, but I wasn't doing the maths yet. I was doing something else. I was being useful. And after 18 months of being a ghost in my own kitchen, useful felt very, very close to alive. Joy moved into the condo around month 7. There was no big conversation about it. She just started staying over a couple of nights, then 3, then 4, and then her bag was in the bedroom, and a second toothbrush was in the holder, and that was that. The aunt was apparently fine with it. The Catholic neighbors apparently weren't asking questions anymore. I think the truth is, we'd both decided without saying it, in the way you decide things when you've been through a death. You stop pretending you're going to live forever, and you just move the toothbrush. What I want to tell you about that period is the contentment. Because if I only tell you about the money, you'll think I was miserable. And I wasn't. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I was sleeping through the night. In our bed, beside another person. The drinking dropped off without me even deciding. I'd have one San Miguel with dinner instead of half a bottle of Powers at 4 in the afternoon. Joy would cook, proper Filipino food, adobo with too much vinegar the way her mother made it, sinigang on the rainy nights, pancit on Sundays. And we'd eat on the balcony with the planes coming in over Mactan and the karaoke from somewhere down the road, and I'd think, all right, this is all right. And the family had absorbed me. I want to try and explain this because it's the bit Westerners don't get, and I didn't get either, not properly, until I was inside it. I went from being Joy's friend to being Tito Brendan inside about a fortnight. Tito means uncle. The brother's 2 kids called me that. Marites called me that when she rang. Cherry May called me that. Nanay started calling me anak, which means son, which is an entirely different category. The cousin whose parentage nobody could explain called me Tito Bren, dropping the Dan, which I quite liked. There was a Facebook group chat that I was suddenly added to, 23 people in it. That was just constant pings, photos of food, prayer requests. Somebody's child had a fever. Somebody's Lechon had come out well. A niece had passed an exam. I muted the notifications after a week, but I'd scroll it sometimes, and there'd always be a thumbs-up emoji from me on a few of the posts, because that's what Tito Brendan was supposed to do. I didn't tell Awifi any of this. I want to flag that for you. My daughter, back in Caragalene, who'd asked me on the phone how I was getting on, I'd told her grand, fine, the weather's mad, the food's good. I didn't mention I was now an honorary uncle to 9 people in a barangay outside Bacolod. Some part of me already knew that wasn't a conversation I wanted to have, which should have told me something. It didn't. The first big request didn't come from Joy. That's the bit I want you to notice. It came from Marites, on a phone call, on a Saturday morning. She rang Joy and asked to speak to me, which was unusual. Joy went out on the balcony to give me privacy, which was also unusual. Marites was awkward on the phone. She was apologetic. She kept saying, "I am so sorry to ask, Tito. I am so sorry." The story was Cherry May, the youngest sister, the one who'd sung me the American song. She was 19. She was bright. She'd got the marks for nursing at a private college in Bacolod City. Government schools were full. The queue was 3 years long. The only realistic route was the private one. The tuition for the year was 220,000 pesos. about 3,600 euros. Maritis and her husband were already supporting Tatay's medication. Joy didn't have that kind of money. The brother in the house didn't have that kind of money. They'd nearly given up on Cherry May going at all. And then I had arrived. And, well, she didn't ask outright either. None of them did. They never did. That was the whole structure of it. I said yes within about 30 seconds. I want to be honest with you. I didn't even think about it for a full minute. I said, Maritis, send me the bank details for the school. I'll pay it directly. I did pay it directly. I felt clever about that. I told myself, you're not handing cash to anyone. You're paying the institution. This is supervised philanthropy. 220,000 pesos went straight from my Bank of Ireland account to the bursar at the Riverside College of Bacolod, or wherever it was, about 3,600 euros. Cherry May rang me on a video call that evening with the whole family round her. She was crying. The mother was crying. The brother was holding back, but his eyes were wet too. They had a banner. They'd actually made a banner on a bedsheet with markers that said, "Thank you, Tito Brendan. God bless you." They held it up, and Cherry May said, "Tito, I will study so hard. I will make you proud. I will become a nurse, and I will repay you. I promise, on the Bible." And I'm sat there in the condo in Lapu-Lapu with Joy beside me, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to lie, I'm thinking I haven't felt this useful in 20 years. The lads on the ships didn't make me feel like that. My own kids didn't make me feel like that, because I was never around enough to know what they needed. This 19-year-old girl in a sugar town was going to be a nurse because of me. Maryad would have wept. I want you to hold that feeling for a second, because that's the trap. The trap isn't a beautiful young girl asking for an iPhone. The trap is being told, at 55, that you matter to people who need you. That'll hollow your wallet faster than anything I have ever seen. The house came up about 3 weeks after Cherry May's tuition was sorted. The brother, his name was Joel, by the way. I keep forgetting to say their names because they all started running together. Joel sent me a string of photos on Messenger. The roof of the family house, leaking. A bucket on the floor catching the water. The bamboo wall round the back where the kitchen was, you could see daylight through it. A child's mattress that had got moldy in the rainy season. Joy didn't pitch it to me. She just sort of let me see the photos over her shoulder while she was scrolling. When I asked, she sighed and said the rainy season was always like this. Every year was worse. But they were saving little by little. Maybe in 3 or 4 years they'd be able to put a proper roof on. 3 or 4 years of that house, with Tatay's foot getting worse, with 2 children sleeping on a moldy mattress. I said, how much would it cost to fix it properly? Joel was on the call within 10 minutes. He'd clearly been waiting. The figure was 400,000 pesos, about 6,550 euros, which would do the roof, replace the bamboo wall with concrete blocks, and put in proper guttering. I asked to see a quote. He sent me one within the hour from a contractor in Bacolod City. Looked legitimate. Itemized. I'd done enough refits on ships to know what an honest quote looks like. I said yes. I told myself this was a one-off capital expense. 400,000 pesos. About 6,550 euros. I wired it to Joel's bank account because the contractor needed it up front for materials. Construction started. Joel was sending me photos every other day. The old roof off, the rafters going up, the new tin going on. The thing took on a life of its own once the contractor was on site. Within about 3 weeks, I got a messenger from Joel, awkward, saying the contractor had pulled up the floor in one room and the foundations underneath were rotten, The whole back of the house was sinking. They'd need to redo the foundations, or the new roof would crack within a year. Another 180,000 pesos, about 2,950 euros. I said yes. Then, while they were doing the foundations, the contractor said it'd only cost another 120,000 pesos, approximately 1,970 euros, to add a small extra bedroom on the back, which the brothers' 2 kids could share, so they weren't sleeping on the floor in the main room. I said yes. Then a proper bathroom with running water and a flush toilet. The family had been using a pour flush in a shed out back for 30 years, and Joy mentioned it once, gently, on a Sunday evening, that her mother's knees were getting bad, and the shed was a long walk in the rain. 150,000 pesos, about 2,460 euros. I said yes. Then Nanay was suggested as a candidate for running a small sari-sari store out the front of the house. Every barangay in the Philippines has one of these. They're little wooden kiosks selling shampoo sachets and instant coffee and cigarettes one at a time. And a proper concrete frontage with a counter and shelves was going to be 250,000 pesos, about 4,100 euros. The argument, which Joy made, and I genuinely think she believed it, was that the store would generate income, and the family would be less dependent on me long term. I said yes to that too. By month 11, I had put 1.1 million pesos into that house, about 18,000 euros. Out of savings I'd been building for 30 years for a different house, in West Cork, with a view of Roaring Water Bay. I'm going to be honest with you about something. There was a Tuesday afternoon in month 9, before the bathroom was done, when I was sitting on the balcony in Lapu-Lapu, and I'd been reading about Filipino culture on a forum somewhere. Utang na loob, the debt of gratitude, the idea that a kindness creates an obligation that runs for life, the way the eldest daughter holds the whole family on her back. The OFW culture, where 2.5 million Filipinos work overseas just to send money home, and a foreign husband is just another version of an OFW in the family's eyes. I read all that, and I sat with it, and I thought, all right, you understand this now? You're a grown man. You've gone in with your eyes open. But I hadn't. You see, I'd read about it the way you read about the weather in a country you're not in. I hadn't done the maths on what it actually meant for me. I knew I was being a Tito. I didn't know yet that being a Tito was a permanent contract. I never rang a wife, not once during that whole stretch. I sent her photos of the sea view and the food. Nothing about the house. Nothing about Cherry May. Nothing about the 18 grand. She'd ring me about once a fortnight, and I'd take the call out on the balcony where Joy couldn't hear, and I'd tell her, grand, fine, the weather's mad, and I'd hang up and feel slightly sick for about 10 minutes afterwards. That's the bit I'm most ashamed of, if you want the truth. Not the money. The lying to my daughter. The maths I could fix. The lying I'd have to live with. The house was finished by the start of month 12. There was a small inauguration thing. The parish priest came round and blessed the doorways. Nanay cried into the new sari-sari counter. Photos went up on the family Facebook of all of them lined up out front. I wasn't there. I'd told them I'd come down for it, but at the last minute I said I had a stomach bug. The truth was, I couldn't face being the Kano in the center of the photos. Joy went without me and brought me back a Tupperware of leftover lechon. I thought, in the back of my head, that the requests would slow down once the house was done. I told myself that. New house, working sari-sari, Cherry May's tuition paid, Tatay's medication on a stable footing. All right, we're through the worst of the capital expenses. Now we just settle into normal life. The requests didn't slow down, they just changed shape. The first one was the trike. About a fortnight after the house was finished, Joel, the brother, got into a bit of difficulty at the cane mill where he'd been on contract. I didn't get the full story, something about the supervisor and a row over hours, but the upshot was he was out of work and had 2 kids and a wife living in the new house Tito Brendan had just built. Joy raised it gently one morning over breakfast. She said, "Joel has been thinking. With his motor skills, he could maybe drive a tricycle. There's a route in the barangay that needs a driver. The man before retired. The route is good. Weddings and the school run and the market run." A new tricycle in Bacolod was running 90,000 pesos, about 1,470 euros. Second-hand were a false economy, she said. You'd be putting money into them every month. I asked how much for new, and she told me. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for a day and a half. Then I sent the money. I told myself it was an investment. The brother could earn 600 pesos a day on a good day. That was about 10 euros. That'd cover the family's daily food costs at least, less burden on me long term. That's how I sold it to myself. Same logic as the sari-sari store. Same logic as the tuition. I want you to notice the pattern, because I didn't notice it until I was on a plane. Every fresh request came with a story about how it was going to reduce the future requests. None of them did. They just opened the door for the next one. A fortnight after the trike, Joel's eldest, a lad of about 13, needed a laptop for online classes. The school had gone to a hybrid model, and the textbook was on a portal you had to log into. 35,000 pesos for a decent one from National Bookstore in Bacolod. About 570 euros. I sent it. The boy sent me a video of himself opening the box. Earnest, polite. "Thank you, Tito Brendan. I will study hard." Christ, he was the spit of my own Connor at that age. A cousin of Joy's, not one I'd met, one in Iloilo, went into hospital with dengue. Severe case, the hemorrhagic kind. Joy got the call at about 11 at night, and she was crying before she'd put the phone down. 60,000 pesos for the bill at the private hospital. About 980 euros. I sent it inside the hour. The cousin lived. I did get a thank you messenger from her about 2 weeks later, which I'll grant. An aunt, Nane's older sister, who I think I'd met at the Lechon dinner the first time, needed cataract surgery. 45,000 pesos. About 735 euros. Sent it. I'm rattling these off so you get the cumulative weight. From month 11 to month 13, on top of the household expenses and the condo and Joy's monthly support, which I haven't even mentioned yet, Joy was getting 20,000 pesos a month from me, about 330 euros, what we called her personal money, which was for clothes and toiletries and visits home. On top of all that, in a roughly 8-week stretch, another 230,000 pesos went out the door, about 3,770 euros. There were 2 things that happened in that stretch that I want you to hear. The first one, Joy stopped working at the pharmacy. Around month 12, she came to me and said the manager had been giving her a hard time about the schedule. She was missing shifts because of family stuff. She thought maybe it was time to take a break. I said, "Are you sure? You've been there 9 years." She said, "Yes, my Brendan, I think family is more important now, and you are providing." I let it go. I didn't push. I'd been pushing my own wife to give up her job for years, and Mariad had refused. And here was a woman saying yes, family first, and well, I told myself it was lovely. What it actually was me now paying for her time. 24 hours of it. Every day. The second thing. Nanay started calling me Anak more often. Anak means son. Up to that point, she'd called me Sir Brendan, or Kuya, which is older brother. Anak was a step up. The first time she did it on a video call, I felt my chest go warm, and I didn't think anything of it. Then, on a later call, she said, very gently, "My Anak, your cousin Marisol, Joy's first cousin, the one who lives in Manila, is getting married next March. She has no godfather for the wedding. It would be such a blessing if my Anak could be a sponsor." A sponsor at a Filipino wedding is not a Western godfather. A sponsor is a financial guarantor and a status symbol. They name you in the program. You stand at the altar. You are expected to give a substantial gift. The going rate, Joy explained when I asked, was 30,000 pesos, about 490 euros. For a cousin I had never met. I said yes. Of course, I said yes. I'd already started saying yes by reflex by then. The yes was out before I'd properly thought about the no. The third thing, and this is the one I want to flag. About week 13 of all this, I got a phone call on my Irish mobile from a woman at Bank of Ireland's fraud department. Polite young one, sounded like she was 25. Very careful. She said, "Mr. O'Sullivan, we've noticed an unusual pattern of international transfers to the Philippines over the last 12 months. Could you confirm these are authorized?" I said, "They're authorized, yeah." She said, "We just want to make sure, sir, because the pattern is consistent with a category of fraud we monitor for." I said, "It's not fraud, love. It's family." She said, "Right. Well, we can stop flagging the transfers if you'd like, sir." I said, "Yes, please do." I hung up, and I sat in the condo for about 20 minutes feeling something I didn't have a name for. The young one at the bank had given me a chance to look at it from outside, just for a second, and I'd told her to put the lid back on. Should have sat with the question longer. Didn't. I want to be clear about one thing. I never thought Joy was scamming me. I checked her phone once. I'm ashamed of it. I am. I'm an Irishman from Cork, who'd been married 26 years, to a woman who'd never given me a moment's reason to doubt her. And I was now going through this woman's phone while she was in the shower. There was nothing on it. No second man. No hidden chats. The messenger was full of family group chats and church group chats and what I think were prayer chains for various sick relatives. I felt sick at myself for looking. I never told her I'd done it. The problem wasn't Joy. The problem I was starting to suspect, quietly in the back of my head, on the nights I was lying awake, was that the family was a bottomless thing, and I had a finite bottom. There was no version of this where the money stopped, because there was always going to be another aunt, another cousin, another laptop, another emergency. Not because they were trying to bleed me, because there were 40 of them and one of me, and I was the only one with a Bank of Ireland account. I started doing arithmetic in my head at night. Just rough sums, eyes shut, Joy asleep beside me. 25 plus 35 plus 35 for the medication and Joy's support and the condo, that's the monthly. Then add the one-offs averaged out. I couldn't quite remember what the total was. That was the bit that frightened me. I'd been an engineer. I'd run fuel calculations for 40,000-ton ships. I knew exactly to the liter what we'd burned in a Suez transit. And I could not tell you what I'd spent on this family in 12 months. One Tuesday morning, Joy went to the Save More at the bottom of the condo to pick up groceries. I'd be alone in the flat for about an hour. I waited until I heard the lift go, and I got up off the couch, and I got the laptop out, and I logged into Bank of Ireland. I had a notebook in the drawer that the previous tenant had left behind. Spiral-bound thing, blue cover. I took it out. I clicked back 12 months on the statements, and I started writing it all down. That's where the next bit of the story starts. With me, on a Tuesday morning, doing what I should have done a year before. It took me about 40 minutes the first time. I worked back month by month, statement by statement, and I wrote down every transfer over €1,000 and every cluster of smaller ones. I used the Gcash export on a separate page. I cross-referenced the wire transfers to Joel for the house against the dates the contractor was meant to have invoiced. I'm an engineer. That's the only way I know how to do anything. Itemize it, total it, check it twice. I had a number by the time I heard the lift coming back up. €34,000. I closed the laptop and shoved the notebook under the cushion of the couch, and Joy came in with 2 bags of groceries from Save More and asked if I wanted some pancit for lunch. I said, yeah, that'd be lovely. I ate the pancit. I did not look at her properly. That night, after she went to bed, I got the notebook out again and ran the numbers a second time. The first total had been €33,750. The second was €34,210. I'd missed a couple of small Gcash transfers in the first pass. I rounded to €34,000 and underlined it twice and stared at it. Half my savings. Half of what Mariad and I had put aside since 1995 for a small place near Shul. Gone in 14 months. I want to tell you what wasn't in the notebook. There was no proof of fraud. There was no second account I could find. There was no entry that said Joy bought herself a Land Rover or Joel never built the bedroom. Every euro I'd sent had gone, as far as I could tell, to a real thing, a real medication, a real tuition, a real bag of cement, a real hospital bed. The contractor's quotes had been honest. Cherry May was going to nursing school. Tatai's foot had not got worse. Joy had not pocketed anything. I want to make that clear because I don't want to send you out of this video thinking she robbed me. She didn't. What there was instead, and this is the bit that took me 3 weeks to fully sit with, was just the maths. The pension was the next thing I checked. I'd been telling myself for months that I had €2,200 a month coming in. The actual figure, after the Irish tax was applied to the merchant marine portion, was closer to €1,800. The difference is not enormous on paper. It's enormous when you've been spending €2,400 a month, and assuming you're only €200 over. The condo HOA, which I'd been ignoring, had also gone up twice while I'd been there. First from 4,500 pesos to 5,200 pesos, then from 5,200 pesos to 6,800 pesos, because the building was putting in new lifts. About another €120 a month I hadn't budgeted for. I did the projection on the back of an envelope at 4 in the morning, Joy snoring quietly beside me. At my current burn rate, pension, plus the family, plus the condo, plus Joy's allowance, plus whatever the next emergency was, my savings were gone before my 60th birthday. After that, I'd be on a pension that didn't even cover Joy's monthly allowance and Tatai's medication, never mind the next aunt's cataracts. I wouldn't be retiring in the Philippines on $2,000 a month. I'd be a charity case waiting on Cherry May to graduate and start sending money home, which, given the way Filipino nursing pay actually works, was a fairy story I'd been telling myself, and there was nothing to do about it. That was the cleanest, hardest bit. There was no villain to confront, no deception to expose, no moment where I could go to Joy and say, "Right, that's it, you've been caught." Because she hadn't been caught at anything. She'd been Joy. She'd been the eldest daughter in a Filipino family, with a sick father and a bright sister, and a leaky roof, and a foreign boyfriend with a Bank of Ireland account. From inside her culture, she had not done a single thing wrong. From inside mine, I'd let myself forget how to do basic subtraction. I went through it again over the next 3 weeks. I'd wait until Joy was asleep. She slept like a child, on her side, one hand under her cheek. And I'd take the laptop out to the balcony with the notebook. And I'd add things up. I made a sheet. Monthly fixed costs. Monthly variable costs. One-off capital expenses. Projection at 12 months, 24 months, 36. I made a separate page for what was left. I made a third page that just said, "What now?" at the top, with nothing under it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't ring a wife. I didn't ring my brother Donald in Limerick. I didn't post on the bloody expat forum. I sat with it on my own because that's what I do. The lads on the ships used to slag me for it, that I'd disappear into my own head for a fortnight at a time, and I'd disappeared again into a one-bedroom condo in Lapu-Lapu with a notebook from the previous tenant. The Sunday, in the middle of all that, I went to Mass on my own. Told Joy I'd a headache. I went to the Santo Niño shrine, sat in the back, and I held the wooden rosary in my pocket through the whole Mass. The peppercorn beads, blessed by Joy's mother in a parish church I'd never been to. I wasn't praying. I was just sitting there listening to the Tagalog, and the priest doing the homily half in English, half in Cebuano, and somewhere between the consecration and the Our Father, I had the cleanest thought I'd had in 14 months. It was this: Maread would have done what Joy is doing. If it had been my mother dying of diabetes in a leaky house, Maread would have moved heaven and earth to get her care. The difference is, Maread's family was 3 people I never saw. Joy's family is 40, and they all live within a grab ride of each other, and the obligation runs both ways and forever. I'm not being scammed, I'm being absorbed by a culture that absorbs people. And there's no clean way out of it that doesn't involve me being the one who said no. I cried for the first time since the funeral. Quietly, in the back of the church, in front of strangers. Wiped my face with my sleeve. Walked out. Got a grab back to Lapu-Lapu. Joy made me a cup of Nescafe and asked how the Mass was. I said grand. I sat on the balcony with her and watched the planes come in. I told her on a Wednesday afternoon at a cafe called Abaca on the road into Mactan town. Nice place, good coffee, expat clientele, run by Filipinos. I'd asked her out for coffee, just the 2 of us, and I think she knew before we sat down because she had her hands folded in her lap the way she did when she was steadying herself. I didn't dress it up. I'm not capable of dressing things up at the best of times, and certainly not when I'm trying not to break in front of a woman I love. I said, "Joy, I have to go home for a while. Things at home, with my wife and the house. I have to sort some things. I don't know how long. I'm telling you straight." She nodded. She didn't cry. That was the thing that nearly broke me, that she didn't cry. She just looked at me for a long bit, and then she said, "Are you coming back, my Brendan?" I said, "I don't know, love. I genuinely don't know." She said, "Okay, I will pray for you." She said it the way you'd say it if you meant it, not the way you'd say it to keep someone soft. I believed her. I believe her still. I booked the flight that evening. Cebu to Doha, to Heathrow to Cork. 24 hours. Joy helped me pack. She folded my shirts the way her mother had folded her brother's, in thirds, then in half. And she put the wooden rosary on top of the pile in the case herself, even though I'd already taken it out of my coat pocket to put it there. Marites flew in from Cebu City to see me off. Joy and Marites both came to Mactan Cebu International on the Thursday afternoon. We were quiet on the way over. The trike driver had the radio on, some Bisaya talk show, and nobody spoke much. At the departures barrier, Marites hugged me and said, "Thank you, Tito Brendan, for everything. You will always be family." Joy hugged me last. She held on for longer than I expected. When she let go, she put her hand on my chest, over the breast pocket of my shirt, and pressed something flat into it, a folded piece of paper. She said, "Don't read it now. Read it when you are flying." I went through security. I sat in the gate area. I did not read it. I got on the plane. I did not read it. I sat down. The plane taxied out. We took off. The captain came on and said we were over the South China Sea, and the city lights were behind us, and Mactan was a small bright shape down to the right. I took the note out then. It was on a piece of lined notebook paper, folded in quarters, in her round, careful handwriting. It said, "My Brendan, whatever you decide, I am grateful. You gave my father 2 more years and my sister a life. If you do not come back, I will understand. If you come back, I will be here. Either way, you are not alone. I love you, Joy." There were no money requests. There was no guilt. There was no manipulation. There was just that. I read it 3 times, and then I folded it back up and put it in my breast pocket beside the rosary. And I sat in seat 34A of the Qatar Airways flight to Doha, and I cried for the 2nd time in 2 weeks, very quietly, with my face turned to the window so the woman beside me wouldn't have to deal with it. Then we landed in Doha, and I had a 4-hour layover, and I sat in the terminal and stared at the back of a Costa coffee, and tried to work out what kind of man I was about to be when I got off the next plane in Cork. Cork in November is a particular kind of gray. You forget it when you've been away. Soft rain coming sideways off the river, the lights on early, everyone in coats. I got off the plane at 4 in the afternoon, and it was already nearly dark, and the air had that smell of turf smoke and damp tarmac, and I stood at the taxi rank with my 1 case and the rosary in my pocket, and thought, right, you're home. Whatever home means now. The Glanmire house was exactly as I'd left it. That was the bit that nearly knocked me sideways. I'd been gone 15 months. 15 months. That's what it worked out to in the end. And Maryad's coat was still on the hook beside the door. The kettle was in the same place on the counter. The photo of the 4 of us at Awaif's confirmation was still on the wall in the hall. I'd half expected dust everywhere, but Awaifa had been letting herself in with the spare key once a fortnight to air the place out. Fair play to her. The fridge had a single pint of milk in it that she'd put there that morning. Nothing else. I didn't ring Awaifa the first night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off and the rain on the window and a glass of water. Not whiskey, water. I'd promised myself that on the plane. And I just listened to the house being quiet. Different quiet from the condo. Older quiet. Maryad's quiet. I rang her the next evening and asked her to come round on Saturday and to bring a bottle of something that I needed to talk to her properly. She went silent on the phone for a second, and then she said, "Da, are you all right?" I said, "I will be. Saturday." She came on the Saturday with a bottle of Powers and a takeaway from the Indian on the lower Glanmire Road. We ate at the kitchen table, and I told her the whole thing. From the laptop at 4 in the morning to Joy's note in seat 34A. I didn't dress any of it up. The 34,000 euro figure I said out loud, properly, for the first time since I'd written it in the notebook. I told her about Christian Filipina, the rosary, the condo, the diabetes, the tuition, the house, the trike, the wedding sponsorship, the lot. I told her about the bank ringing me. I told her about checking Joy's phone, and I told her how ashamed of myself I was for that. Awifi listened the whole way through, didn't interrupt once. Then, when I'd finished, she sat there for about a minute with her hand round the glass, and finally said, "Da, you spent half of Mom's house on a sari-sari shop." I said, "Yeah, I did. I did, love." She didn't shout. That'd have been easier, in a way. She got very quiet, set the glass down, and said, "And you didn't ring me. In 15 months. You didn't ring me once and tell me what was happening." Then she got her coat, and she left. She didn't speak to me for 2 months after that. Not properly. The odd text message about practical things, but nothing else. Connor heard about it from her in Brisbane and rang me about 3 weeks later, and that was a different kind of conversation. Lower temperature, more bemused than angry. He just said, "Da, what were you doing? What were you actually doing?" I said, "I don't know, son. I was lonely. I was lonely, and I made a meal of it." He said, "Right. Well, don't do it again." Australians are very practical, in fairness. The thing Awifi couldn't get past, when she finally came round to talk again, the thing she said over the second whiskey on a Tuesday in February, was that I hadn't told her. She wanted me to paint Joy as a villain. She wanted a clean betrayal she could hate, and I wouldn't give her one because there wasn't one. She said, "Da, I want this to be a story about someone bad happening to you, and you're telling me a story about you." And I said, "Yeah, I am. Because that's the story." That's the bit I think about most. She wasn't wrong. Joy and I are still in touch. I want to be honest about that, too. She messages me on Messenger every couple of weeks, always short. A photo of the finished house with Nani sitting out front beside the sari-sari counter, holding up a sachet of shampoo for sale like a trophy. A photo of Cherry May in her white nursing student uniform with the school crest on the pocket, grinning at the camera, looking about 12 years old. A photo of Tate, still alive, foot still on, sitting in the new chair in the new front room waving at the camera. She doesn't ask for anything in any of them. She never has. I reply about half the time. I keep it short. "He looks well." Tell her I'm proud of her. Glad the rains are easier this year. I don't send money. I haven't sent €1 since the morning of the flight. I made that decision in the Doha terminal, and I've held it. I won't pretend that's been easy. There've been 2 emergencies since I came home, a typhoon that took the roof off Maritis's place in Cebu, and a hospital admission for Tate back in October. And I knew about both of them from the family Facebook chat that I never quite left. Both times Joy didn't ask. Both times I didn't offer. The roof got fixed by a cousin in Manila who works construction. Tate came home after 4 days. Life went on without me funding it. That was a useful thing to learn. I want to tell you what I'm doing now, because I don't want you leaving this thinking the story's over. I stopped drinking before noon. That was the first thing. Not all the way off it. I'll have a pint with my brother Donald when he comes down from Limerick. But no more half bottles of Powers in the kitchen at 4 in the afternoon. I started walking. There's a path from Cove out along the headlands above the harbor. You can see the cruise terminal and the old emigrant pier, and on a clear day, you can see all the way out past Roach's Point. I do that walk 3 or 4 times a week. Slow, with the bad knees. But I do it. I'm seeing a grief counselor. Woman called Dr. Hennessy with rooms above a chemist on the South Mall. I should have gone to see her 2 years ago instead of opening Christian Filipina. And that's one of the things I've said to her, and she's been very decent about not making me feel like an Egypt for it. We talk about Mariad, mostly. About being away when she died. About the funeral I missed. About the kettle still warm. Not about Joy. Joy is a different conversation that I might get to in a year or two. Awif speaking to me again. We had Christmas together, her and Ewan and the kids. She made the dinner in Carrigaline because I wasn't trusted with a turkey yet. She put a Brussels sprout on my plate that I didn't ask for, and I ate it. And she said, "Christ, Da, you must really feel guilty." And we both laughed for the first time since I'd come home. Small things. They're how you come back. Will I go back to the Philippines? I've thought about it. I'm not closed off to it, but if I do, it'll be on different terms. A fixed monthly amount, agreed in writing if you can believe that, an old engineer wanting things in writing, 300 or 400 euro a month, and not a euro more. No house projects, no tuitions, no rebuilds, no sponsorships, no emergencies. A friendship with Joy, if she'll have it on those terms. A holiday, maybe a long one, not a life. And if she can't or won't accept that, then that's my answer, and it's a clean one. So, the lesson from a 55-year-old cork sailor with bad knees and a notebook full of Gcash transfers. Here it is, plain. $2,000 a month, or in my case, 1,800 euro, will keep you alive in the Philippines. It will rent you a decent condo, feed you well, get you to Mass on a Sunday, give you a beer on the balcony in the evenings. That part is true. The YouTube videos aren't entirely lying about that part. What they don't tell you is that $2,000 a month will not keep you, her parents, her sick father, her bright sister, her brother out of work, her 2 nephews, and her nieces, and her auntie with the cataracts, and her cousin with the dengue. It will not. The maths does not work in that direction. And if she's a good Filipina, and I want to say this very clearly, because Joy was a good woman, she is a good woman. If she's a good Filipina, she will not choose between you and them. Because in her world, that is not a choice that a decent person makes. The eldest daughter does not abandon her family for a foreigner's retirement budget. That is not a thing that happens. So the scam isn't always a scam. Sometimes there's no scam at all. Sometimes it's just 2 good people meeting across a gap that the budget will not cover. And the man who walks into that with a 500,000 pesos pension thinking he's going to be a king is the same fool I was. Sat at the kitchen table in Glanmire at 11:30 at night with 3 whiskeys and a YouTube algorithm. I don't regret loving her. I want to say that as the last thing on my own ledger. I genuinely don't. I regret pretending the maths would work. I regret lying to my daughter for 15 months. I regret being absent to my own family for 32 years, and then trying to pay for the absence with another family that wasn't mine. Those are the regrets. Joy isn't one of them. That's about all I've got, lads. Mind yourselves. So that's Brendan O'Sullivan, 55 years old, home in Glanmire, walking the headlands above Cove and slowly putting himself back together. I want to be straight with you about why we put a story like this on Inside the Philippines, because it's not the usual one. There's no Gcash con artist here, no bigamist wife, no vanished funds. The woman in Brendan's story was, by every account he gave us, a decent person doing her best for a family that needed her. The contractor wasn't a fraud. The tuition was paid. The sister is at nursing school. The father is alive. By every clean measure of scam we use on this channel, Brendan wasn't scammed, and he still came home half broke. That's the version of this story we don't tell often enough, and the version a lot of you watching are actually walking into. Not a sting, an absorption. A slow, kind, well-meaning, religiously sincere, family-bound absorption that happens to cost about 34,000 euro in 14 months, and is, from inside the culture, doing it to you, not even slightly malicious. It's just what families do over there. It's just what the eldest daughter is for. So if you're sat watching this with the same YouTube feed Brendan had, the beach videos, the cocktail glasses, the $2,000 a month promise, I'm going to ask you to do the one thing he didn't do until it was too late. Open a notebook. Sit down with the actual numbers. Not for you, for her family. Because if you fall in love with a Filipina, you don't fall in love with a person. You fall in love with a household, and then a barangay, and then a province. Ask yourself what your real monthly limit is. Ask yourself if you can say no when the dengue call comes at 11 at night, because it will come, and it will not always be a lie. And ask yourself, honestly, whether saying no is something you're capable of, given who you are, and what brought you to that YouTube feed in the first place. If you've enjoyed this one, hit the subscribe button, drop us a comment, let us know your own version of this story if you've got one. Next week, we're sitting down with a fella from Manchester who thought he was retiring to Dumaguete and ended up running a bakery he never wanted in a town he can't pronounce. You won't want to miss it. From inside the Philippines. Mind yourselves out there. We'll see you next time.